webinar on CPR. We have lots of heard in, COVID times, the PCR, and then CRP. So I thought I'll talk on CPR now. Okay. See, friends, we all know that we are undergoing through a very unpleasant and unprecedented times of Corona, and we have all experienced all negative emotions. But at the same time, if we take the opportunity, positive outweigh out of it, let us take an opportunity to learn and relearn something. And to relearn something, I've chosen this topic of CPR. That is nothing but update in BLS and ACLS. Okay. So to tell you that in the month of February, only I had attended a workshop on ACLS, experience provider, and then I thought, let us spread that whatever I gained through that workshop through my colleague friends. So I'll be talking more of ACLS and BLS and CPR from the guidelines given by American Heart Association that was given in 2015. Earlier it was released in 2010, then it was got updated and released in 2015. Now we are expecting in 2020 October, but we are not sure that it might be released or it may get delayed also because of Corona times. So, but yes, they have updated the CPR, BLS, and ACLS guidelines in COVID patients also. So they have come up with papers also in May that how we should be giving BLS and ACLS in COVID patients. So that also I'll be discussing. But let me start my lecture like this. This is the theme given by AHA when they conduct workshop for ACLS. And what is the theme? That life is why. So actually life is why is more of a philosophical or a spiritual concept, that why is actually a purpose of life. We should know the purpose. Why do we do what we do? If we know that why exactly, then what becomes easier, what becomes very happier for us. So life is a why should be a celebration of life, and we should know why we should be doing what we are doing. Then for doctors, as a community of doctors, what should be our why? Our why should be, one of the why should be to help to make the patients healthier and happier. Okay. And to save the lives. To save the lives, we should know the basics in CPR, ACLS, BLS. And if we can save the lives, we can make the other people follow their whys. So our why will help people to follow their whys. So this is in nutshell, life is why is actually a theme given by ACLS. I like that concept. And once I was reading a book, they said only matter is actually why and what you are doing and why you should be doing. That should be very clear, and that should be very right. And where, how, all these questions when will follow eventually, and that will be helped by the universe. So you should be very clear about your why and what. Okay. Now coming to the real concept of CPR, let us see the definitions. What do we mean by cardiac arrest? What do we mean by BLS? What do we mean by ACLS? So CPR is given for a cardiac arrest patients or a respiratory arrest patients. So cardiac arrest refers to a circulatory collapse with cessation of cardiac function that is either restored if by offering CPR in the form of BLS or ACLS. If we don't offer that, then it will lead to a cardiac death. So that is a cardiac arrest. Now, CPR is a life-saving emergency procedure performed in case of cardiac arrest in order to support and maintain breathing and circulation. Why we have CPR? To preserve the intake brain function, because time is muscle and time is brain. If we don't provide early CPR, then the brain muscles and the heart muscles will die, and it will be a irreversible death. There won't be any purpose further on. So, and what they've seen that studies that immediate CPR can double or triple the chance of survival. So the purpose of giving CPR is to provide blood flow and oxygen to the heart, brain and other organs, just to till the advanced facilities are available. So that becomes the primary CPR, that is BLS. Now, who can give the BLS? BLS is a basic life support. Those might not be the hearing for the first time. Let me clear it out very basics wise. So basic life support refers to the initial actions. We are in the mall or we are in the airport and somebody gets collapsed. that basic life support should be initiated. That can be initiated by any lay rescuers. It may not be a healthcare worker, but if that collapse occurs in the hospital premises, then it will be given by the healthcare worker. Now, ACLS refers to the later action following the BLS. It involves the advanced techniques of airway, drugs, and if ACLS patient comes out of ACLS, then what follows is post cardiac arrest. So there is a chain: BLS, ACLS, post cardiac arrest care, and all this. Now, ACLS not only involves cardiac arrest, but it can be a setting where it can help the patient to stabilize with impending. Some of the patients can have impending cardiac arrest. Suppose some of the patient comes with chest pain, hypotension, and bradycardia. May not be in cardiac arrest because pulse is there, although hypotension is there, but there is a suspicion of immediate cardiac arrest. So symptomatic bradycardia can also be tackled by ACLS algorithms. So ACLS will take care of cardiac arrest as well as those who are with impending cardiac arrest. So whenever there is a cardiac arrest, then there will be start a chain of survival. Then patient will undergo event and we'll have to offer treatment step by step so that the survival is our final goal. So in outpatient, I'll start the pointer also. So see, if we take a outpatient cardiac arrest, then first is recognition. We have to recognize that patient might be having a cardiac arrest, and then immediately we have to activate the EMS, start high quality CPR. We all be learning all this step by step in details, but this is the chain of survival. Out hospital cardiac arrest, there will be the chain from recognition, activation emergency system to immediate high quality CPR, rapid defibrillation, basic and advanced emergency medical care through ambulance, then reaching to a hospital where ACLS will be given and post cardiac arrest care will be given. So these are the 5 chain of events. If successfully we can intervene through all these events, the survival will be there. What happens to in-hospital cardiac event? In-hospital cardiac, the patient is already admitted. We may suspect some impending cardiac arrest, as I told you the scenario. So surveillance and prevention is very important. Suppose patient is already a renal failure. We have to surveillance, we have to give a surveillance of hyperkalemia, electrolyte imbalance, and we can prevent the cardiac arrest in such kind of patients. So there the surveillance becomes very important. Already patient is a myocardial infarction patient. We suspect that he can throw any kind of VFib, VTEC. So we have to be very suspicious, very surveillant, and so that we can prevent further events. From surveillance and prevention to the recognition and activation of the emergency response system, then it becomes the same. Then immediate high quality CPR, then we give rapid defibrillation, and then advanced life support and post cardiac arrest care. So these are the chain of survivals once that cardiac arrest happens. Now let me start with the basic life support and what are the steps. I'll be talking about in details about the steps, how we step by step go about BLS and ACLS, and in particular situations also like pregnancy and in COVID patients, how we do CPR. And that will be my main talk rather than, studies and trials and all that. Actually speaking, this BLS, ACLS has to be done in. Hello? Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue.
Yes, you
sorry,
can.
sorry, I think there was an interruption.
Yes, yes.
So what I was talking that this is BLS and ACLS is a one full day workshop. So it may not be, I may not be able to cover whole thing in a, half an hour lecture, but I will try to see that the concepts are getting clear and what are the steps involved basically. So let us start with BLS. BLS earlier we think A, B, C, airway, breathing, circulation. No, that is not the case. BLS starts from C, A, B. C stands for compression. Okay, chest compression. And if I have to give, it has to be high quality chest compression. We will discuss that. What is high quality? Compression, then comes airway, then comes breathing, and then comes D for defibrillation. These are the steps. C, A, B, D. Okay. So these are, I think I asked one question pre-test. What are the steps? So compression, airway, breathing, and defibrillation are the steps for BLS. Any patient collapse in the airport, first you start with the importance has to be given with compression and till the defibrillation is achieved. So I would like to show one video where the steps of BLS are shown. Let me share that. It's visible. Video is visible.
No, sir.
No.
No, it
No,
is
no.
not visible.
Second, 1 second. Okay.
No, sir, not visible.
I have one. Give me 1 minute. Now is it visible?
Yes,
sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start from the beginning.
Yes, sir, visible.
So now, okay, just see and listen the video.
Audio is not heard.
1 second.
Sir, please make the audio loudly.
1 second.
When you start sharing, you have to share computer audio.
Yeah, so should I share? 1 second.
When you start sharing the screen, there will be an option which you have to click on saying share audio of the computer.
Yeah.
Below that slide, sir.
Yeah, sure. 1
The
second.
option is there. Optimize and video.
Correct. 1 second. Yeah, correct. I got it.
Step 1.
Now,
Check for responsiveness. Tap and shout, "Are you all right?"
Yes, heard.
Yes, sir. Audible. Yes, sir.
Step number
Audible.
2. Activate the emergency response system and get an AED. Step 3. Circulation. Check the carotid pulse. Do not spend more than 10 seconds checking for a pulse. If you find a pulse, support the patient with rescue breaths. If you can't feel a pulse within 10 seconds, initiate CPR. Immediately give 30 chest compressions, followed by 2 breaths. Okay, step number 4, defibrillation. As soon as possible, connect an AED or defibrillator, and if indicated, deliver a shock. Let's take a look at how the BLS steps come together in an arrest situation with an unconscious patient. Here's our case scenario. A 57-year-old man is experiencing many of the warning signs of acute coronary syndromes, with chest discomfort, indigestion, and feeling faint. He collapses and falls to the floor.
Sir? Sir, can you hear me?
Look or scan the chest for movement.
He's unresponsive. Call a code and get the AED and crash cart now. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. One, 2, 3,
The code team is on the way.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Apply
21,
pads to patient's bare
24,
chest.
25, 26, 27, 28, 29.
Plug in pads connector.
One,
Analyzing heart
Okay,
rhythm.
stand back.
Stay clear of patient.
7, 8.
Shock advised. Charging. Stay
I'm ready
clear
to
of
shock.
patient.
I'm clear,
Deliver
you're
shock
clear,
now.
we're all clear.
Press the shock button now. Begin with compressions.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You can see my PowerPoint now.
Yes, yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So did you see that video in that? That was a BLS actually. Once again. That PowerPoint you can see, na?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Sir, full screen. Do full screen.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So
Okay.
yeah, but I cannot see the other faces.
No, it is better.
Okay, okay, ठीक है. So let us. So you have seen the video. Now we'll go through the steps. In a practical way, what you have seen, we'll see how it was done. So whenever there is a collapse or a cardiac arrest patient, first we have to verify the scene safely. Means if it was a fire happening or it was a traffic, we have to remove the patient from there because the scene safety is for both, for ourselves as well as for patients. So first is scene safety. Then we have to see that patient is unresponsive by tapping on the, as he was, tapping on the shoulder and clavicles, that and he could see that patient was unresponsive. And then he immediately shouted for the help. And then he said, you go and get the crash cart and AED. Before even checking the pulse, for the pulse, he asked for the help. If there is one rescuer is there, he can ask for the help from the mobile, 108 or whatever. He can call the nearby hospital and all that. The idea is to get the AED as early as possible because the idea is to give the defibrillation as early as possible. So in BLS, what matters most is the compression and defibrillation. Okay, that is the most important. So once you have found that patient is unresponsive, shout for the help, ask to get the AED fast, then check the pulse, and pulse has to be checked on carotid. Okay, how much time we should take checking the carotid? One question that was asked, and which pulse has to be checked? That was carotid always. In adults, see, whatever I'm talking is for adults. I may not be able to cover the pediatrics and infants, so my talk is mainly for adult CPR. Okay, so for adult we have to check the carotid, and how much time we should give for checking the carotid pulse? From 5 to 10 seconds, not below 5 seconds and not above 10 seconds. Okay, once we have checked the pulse and pulse is not there, see, there is no pulse, and if there is no breathing, we should start CPR within 10 seconds. Or sometimes we might be doubt that I'm not sure whether pulse is there or not, or pulse is feeble, I'm not sure. Then also we should start CPR because compression and defibrillation has to become as a priority. See, if you check the pulse, there is a pulse, but there is no breathing. There is no normal breathing, but patient has got pulse. Then what we will do? We will give the rescue breathing. And how we will give the rescue breathing? That is one breath every 5 to 6 seconds or about 10 to 12 breaths per minute. And at the same time, we should activate the emergency system and we should go on checking pulse every 2 minutes because we never know that 2 minutes pulse may go on, may disappear, pulse may not be there. And if pulse becomes absent, we should start CPR immediately. That means compression. Now, if there is no pulse, no breathing, we should start CPR in the form of giving compression, and that is 30 compressions followed by 2 breaths. Okay. This cycle should go on till the AED is available. That is automated external defibrillator. That is a machine which analyzes the rhythm and delivers the shock if needed. So we should start giving the cycles of 30 compression with 2 breaths. That is 30:2 is the ratio we should follow. And then once AED arrives, we apply the AED. Even if we are applying the AED, we must continue the compression. We should never stop compression. That is called uninterrupted compression. That is very important. once the AED is applied, the AED is kept on, it will analyze the rhythm. If it is shockable, the AED will give us the instructions that the rhythm is shockable. Please go away. You be clear from this patients, and I will be delivering the shock. And then AED will deliver the shock. Once the shock is delivered by AED, we should not go on checking the pulse. Pulse is there or not? Pulse is there or not? We must start with immediate compression. That was one more question. That after giving the shock, we must start immediately the compression and not waste our time in checking the pulse. But this is very important. See, compression must go on continue. That whole it is that matters the whole, and it saves the life. So again after this, the AED will say that now 2 minutes is there. I'm analyzing the rhythm. If rhythm is shockable, AED will deliver the shocks. So this 2 minute cycle go on, and till the ACLS team arrives. So he said you call the emergency or ACLS team, and then they will take over. Now talking about the high quality CPR. Now it is clear, I think. No, I have stopped.
Sir, I think you stop sharing.
Now, yeah. Okay. So,
Yes.
so I was talking about the high quality CPR. What is high quality CPR? High quality CPR is compression should start within 10 seconds of recognition of cardiac arrest. We should not waste time in checking pulse, whether it is there or not. We should push hard and push fast. What is push hard? Push hard means 5 centimeters down, compressing the sternum 5 centimeters down for adults. And for children, it is again 5 centimeters. For infants, it is about 4 centimeters. So it has to be pushed hard down and push fast. How fast? 100 to 120 compressions per minute. So that fast we should go. We should allow complete chest recoil. We should minimize the interruptions and give effective breath that makes the chest rise. We should see that whenever we are giving the breath, the chest should rise. And at the same time, we should avoid excessive ventilation. Okay. So that was about BLS. What is BLS? Recognizing, then asking for help, starting compression, and then airway, and then defibrillation. Okay. CAB. So compression, airway, and breathing. Breathing, and then defibrillation. Now I'll show you the ACLS. Then after BLS, what comes is ACLS. I'll show you the video of ACLS now.
So join with video sound.
Yeah. 1 second. I think this. Now see, ACL is slightly complex. You have to listen and see properly what are the steps. You must see this. This is a very really interesting video. I must tell you that is happening for a cardiac arrest happening. It is a very common scenario. Patient comes with chest pain. Patient was conscious, was taken on the bed, and then he collapses. And then now we should go about it. Okay. That is what they want to convey. The video is shared. Can you see the video?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so it starts now.
Team dynamics are critical during a code or resuscitation attempt. The interaction among team members has a profound impact on the effectiveness of each individual, as well as the patient's overall survival. Team size may vary, and you'll need to adapt roles accordingly. Regardless of the number, the better you work as a team, the better the potential outcome for your patient. That's why it's so important that you understand not just what to do in a resuscitation attempt, but how to communicate and perform as an effective team, regardless of your role as team member or team leader. A 66-year-old man has arrived in the emergency department with nausea, chest pain, and numbness in his arm.
So you say you're feeling bad about an hour ago?
Yeah, I was getting dizzy. I felt nauseous.
And you're having some chest pains?
Yeah.
We're going to find out what's going on.
Pressure is 70/40. Heart rate is 45. I'm going to get Dr. Loftus.
Mr. Haley, I'm going to put you on some oxygen so you breathe a little easier, okay?
Okay.
I'm also going to put you on a monitor so we can take a look at your heart rhythm.
I'm really dizzy now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Loftus. Looks like sinus bradycardia.
Initial blood pressure was 70/40. Heart rate is 45. Respiratory is 16, and pulse ox is 92. But he's responding well to the nasal cannula.
Let's get 0.5 milligrams of atropine ready, though.
What's going on? Is something wrong?
I don't know, son. Nurse?
His heart is beating too slow, so we're going to see what the doctor thinks, okay?
Hello, I'm Dr. Loftus. How are you feeling?
Not so good, doctor.
Mr. Haley, can you hear me? He's unresponsive.
He's in VFib. Lenora, get the pads on, get ready to shock.
Come with me, come with me.
Mark, start chest compressions.
Ma'am, I really don't want my son to see this. Is there anywhere I can take him?
Absolutely. If you'd like, I can show you to the family waiting room.
Okay.
Okay, come on, let's go.
Pads on. Charging. Clear. Shocking. Shock delivered.
Resume compressions. Dana, you're recording?
Recording.
Sam, you're managing the airway. Lenora, have you managed to establish an IV?
No, not able to get IV access.
Okay, Carla, let's move to IO.
Moving to IO access.
We'll continue CPR for 2 more minutes, and then we'll evaluate to see if we need additional shocks. In the meantime, Carla, can you prepare 1 milligram of epinephrine, but don't give it until I say so.
Preparing 1 milligram of epinephrine, and we'll wait for your order to give it.
We're at 2 minutes.
Hold compressions. Switch compressors. He's still in VFib. Continue compressions. Let's get ready to shock again.
Charging at 200 joules. Clear. Shocking. Shock delivered.
Resume compressions. Okay, Carla, go ahead and deliver that epi now.
Delivering 1 milligram of epinephrine. And the IO is flushed.
Great. We've delivered 2 shocks and 1 milligram of epinephrine. If the patient's still in VFib at the next rhythm check, then the next medication to consider is amiodarone. So, Carla, go ahead and prepare 300 milligrams of amiodarone, but don't give it until I tell you.
Preparing 300 milligrams of amiodarone, and we'll wait for your order to give it.
We're at 2 minutes.
Okay, let's analyze. Switch compressors. Looks like the patient's in persistent VFib. Resume compressions.
Resuming compressions.
Charging. Clear. Shocking. Shock delivered.
Continue compressions.
Do you want to give the amiodarone now?
Thanks, Dana. Carla, go ahead and give that amiodarone now.
Delivering 300 milligrams of amiodarone. And the IO is flushed.
Great. We've delivered 3 shocks. After the second shock, we gave 1 milligram of epinephrine. We just gave 300 milligrams of amiodarone. Go ahead, Carla, and prepare another milligram of epinephrine, and I'm going to intubate.
Got it.
2 minutes.
Let's analyze. Switch compressors. We have sinus bradycardia. Do we have a pulse?
No, I don't feel one.
Continue chest compressions. All right, let's review the reversible causes by considering the H's and T's.
He came in with chest discomfort. Could it be coronary thrombosis?
That's what I'm thinking. Everything seems to suggest a STEMI.
Patient was also hypertensive on presentation. How about pericardial tamponade?
Good idea. Let's check a quick ultrasound.
2 minutes.
Let's analyze. Switch compressors. The monitor now shows sinus tachycardia. Capno just went to 40. Sam, do we have a pulse?
Yes, I've got a rapid weak pulse.
Okay, great. Let's initiate immediate post-cardiac arrest care. We check to see if the patient is breathing and responsive. Lenora,
can you squeeze
I
my
need a
finger?
complete set of vitals and labs.
Patient's still responsive. No, he's still not breathing.
Okay, continue ventilating.
Patient has a blood pressure of 82/40 with a heart rate of 130.
He's hypotensive. Let's get him another liter of saline. Lenora, can I get a 12V VCG, please? And let's check the patient's temperature and initiate targeted temperature management protocol. O2 saturation is 96%, and blood pressure is up to 110/70 now.
What's your 12 lead?
He has a STEMI. Mark, call the cath lab and let them know that we have a STEMI patient that just had ROSC after cardiac arrest. Let them know that the patient is now hemodynamically stable, and we've initiated targeted temperature management.
The return of spontaneous circulation, or ROSC, is not the end of the cardiac arrest protocol. Targeted temperature management, previously known as therapeutic hypothermia, is the only intervention that has been shown to improve neurologic recovery after cardiac arrest and ROSC. The resuscitation team should consider inducing targeted temperature management for any patient who remains comatose after ROSC. The AHA recommends cooling to a target temperature of 32 to 36 degrees Celsius for at least 24 hours. More scientific studies show that survival rates improve significantly with a comprehensive system of post-cardiac arrest care. It's important to know your local system's plan for the management of post-cardiac arrest patients. Combining your knowledge of essential arrest skills with effective team dynamics can give your team a better chance of success with every resuscitation attempt.
Okay, did you see the video?
Yes.
You
Yes.
see my
Yes.
screen?
Yes. We can see your screen.
Okay, okay. So, see, if you could see in the video, there was a teamwork, you know. One was the leader, doctor, who was guiding everybody what to do. One was doing compressor, and that was alternate compressor. If you could see, one was giving defibrillator, followed by a alternate compressor and defibrillator. There was a interchanging of the persons. Then one was recording the time every 2 minutes. It was, you know, after 2 minutes, she used to tell, now 2 minutes is over, check the rhythm. And if it is shockable, shock. So one was the recorder of the time. And one was giving a IV access or a IO access. So it is a people of 6 persons, ideally, a team of 6 persons who will be giving the ACLS, so that the things becomes very in a timely fashion and very effective. So only thing I'm not actually cannot see my this thing. What has happened? Forget it. Okay. So in nutshell, that what are the steps for ACLS? So we'll discuss that. Whatever we have seen the video, that exactly what we are supposed to do. That in ACLS, the cycle consists of 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, we have to check the rhythm. If rhythm is shockable, we should go on giving the shock before even checking for the pulse. If rhythm is organized, see if the rhythm is organized, then only we should be able to check the pulse and not then check the pulse and then compression. Otherwise, if rhythm is shockable, like which are the rhythms which are shockable? VTAC and VFib. So pulseless VTAC and VFib are the shockable rhythms, where we should just analyze the rhythm on monitor and immediately we should give the shock even before checking the pulse. So that was the main concept. So how we start giving oxygen, attach monitor and defibrillator, check the rhythm on the monitor. If the rhythm is VFib or VTAC, give the shock, immediately continue giving CPR for next 2 minutes. Okay, immediately after give CPR without interruptions. Don't interrupt the compressions. Then what we do is drug therapy. We take the IV access or IO access and we give epinephrine every 3 to 5 minutes. And if the even after two shocks, VFib persists, then we can give amiodarone. So they gave amiodarone 300 first, and then 150 milligram of amiodarone was repeated in the 5th shock. So in the 3rd shock, if VFib persists, we should give amiodarone, and 5th shock, 4th shock, 150 milligram. and epinephrine has to be repeated every 3 to 5 minutes. So shock, epinephrine and amiodarone, these are the main cornerstone parts of the ACLS. At the same time, one person, what he does is achieve the advanced airway. He either put a laryngeal mask airway or endotracheal intubation, and what he monitors is called quantitative waveform capnography. And everything after all this, they analyze what could have been the reason, that is differential diagnosis. They were discussing what could have happened. So they were thinking that he had a chest pain, so it could be a STEMI. Then one said he had a hypotension, so it could be a cardiac tamponade. So we have to think of the reversible causes. So in ACLS, we start with CPR, give oxygen, attach monitor. If rhythm is shockable, give shock. Then take the IV access. Or if IV access is not possible, take the IO, intraosseous access. If IO is achieved, then start giving epinephrine every 2 minutes. And consider advanced airway with capnography. And go on shocking every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes you have to analyze the rhythm. If rhythm is shockable, go on giving the shock. If rhythm is not there, if there is a asystole, or if rhythm is there but pulse is not there, that is PEA. What is pulse? Pulseless electrical activity. That rhythm is there on the monitor but pulse is not palpable. So there also you go on giving the CPR for 2 minutes. If you see in the video, once there was a rhythm and then he asked for the pulse and there was no pulse, so he continued giving compression. So that was a PEA. So there was a bradycardia, and then he said you check if there is a rhythm, analyze on the monitor, and so to check whether it is a PEA or not PEA, he has to check the pulse. If there is no pulse, we have to continue go on giving CPR for 2 minutes, give epinephrine. For asystole and PE, the atropine is out. See, there is no atropine, only epinephrine. So give chest compression and epinephrine if there is asystole or PEA. If it is VA or PVT, then go on giving CPR, epinephrine and amiodarone. So after all these cycles, if there is a pulse coming, then it is a reversal return of spontaneous circulation. That is known as ROSC, that is return of spontaneous circulation. And once that ROSC comes, patient has to subjected for post-cardiac arrest care. So he was subjected for cath lab and therapeutic hypothermia. So that was the post-cardiac arrest care. Now let us discuss about how do we give about the shocks. How much shock, what shock, biphasic or monophasic. So for defibrillation in shockable rhythms, we can give either biphasic or monophasic. If it has to be given monophasic, we select joules of 360 joules. If it has to be biphasic, then we initially see that whatever the manufacturer recommendation is there, but usually it is around 200 joules. Or whatever maximum available. Second and subsequent doses can be equivalent, either 200, 200, 200, or you can go 200, 300, 360. Both are equivalent and both are same. So one can go first shock 200, second shock 200, third shock 200, 200, 200, or 200, 300, 360, 360. Or if we are using monophasic, it has to be only 360. We have discussed about high quality CPR. What is high quality CPR? Push hard, push fast, minimize the interruptions, avoid excessive ventilation, and rotate compressor, because if one person is going to go on compressing, then he will get tired. So we have to rotate the compressor every 2 minutes with the who is giving defibrillator. So, and see, in BLS we learned that there is 30:2 ratio. Now in ACLS, once that advanced airway is achieved, there is no 30:2 ratio. It becomes continuous compression for 2 minutes, and the ventilation we give, the ambu bag we give is for every 5 to 6 seconds. One breath is given for 1 full second. So every 5 to 6 seconds, so it becomes 10 to 12 breaths. See, 60 seconds, it becomes 10 to 12 breaths in a minute if airway is achieved. Now, how do we monitor that whatever we are giving CPR is effective or not? So we apply a machine, what is known as waveform capnography. And that capnography will show that end tidal carbon dioxide. Now, if end tidal carbon dioxide is less than 10, that whatever CPR we are giving is not effective. We should improve our CPR in giving pushing hard, pushing fast, and minimum interruption, so that EtCO2 should become at least more than 20. So that should be, that is what how we assess our CPR quality. Now advanced airways, we give either we use endotracheal tube, or we can use laryngeal mask airway, or there is something known as esophageal tracheal tube. This all there can be used. This laryngeal mask airway can be easily be put without even direct visualization. So it becomes very easy. If somebody is not very well trained in putting endotracheal tube, one can use laryngeal mask airway. Laryngeal mask airway is also known as supraglottic advanced airway. It just pushes up, it stays above the glottic area, and the ventilation can be achieved through that. Now all this can be the quality of ventilation we can judge from the wave capnography. And wave capnography, the graph will be like this. If there is no wave, it will tell us that the ET tube is placed in the wrong place. It might be placed in the esophagus, and there won't be any tracing of the EtCO2. If the EtCO2 is less than 80, less than 20, then it is not. It will tell us that the whatever quality of CPR we are giving is not very qualitative, and we should improve the CPR. If it is more than 40, that means patient has achieved the return of spontaneous circulation. So this will give us the idea whether the tube is in place, whether we are giving good quality CPR, or whether we have achieved the return of spontaneous circulation. So return of circulation is mainly by end tidal carbon dioxide. There is a machine that picks up the end tidal carbon dioxide and will show the graph like this. If it is more than 40, then it indicates there is a return of spontaneous circulation. And if there is a return of spontaneous circulation, you will feel the pulse, you will get the blood pressure also, and you will see the tracing of arterial line also. So at the end of the days, we should assess differentials, what must have led to the cardiac arrest. So we must know 5H and 5Ps. Now what are 5H? One by one. The 5H is hypovolemia. Hypovolemia could be the external bleeding, or it could be the internal bleeding. If hypovolemia we have to treat, then we can give the fluids or blood products if needed. What could be the hypoxia? The second is hypoxia. What could be the events which can lead to the hypoxia? It could be the carbon monoxide poisoning, or it could be the drowning, or it could be, narcotic overdose, which may lead to the hypoxia. But how do we treat the hypoxia? We treat by giving oxygen and ventilating. There could be the H, hydrogen ion excess, that means acidosis basically. It could be respiratory acidosis, it could be metabolic acidosis. All this H will lead to ultimately cardiac arrest. So we have to find out what could be the preceding event, so that we can give the treatment and we can treat the reversible cause. Now acidosis could be metabolic acidosis, renal failure associated acidosis, lactic acidosis, or a respiratory acidosis. There also, if it is respiratory acidosis, what we do? We give the adequate ventilation. And if it is a metabolic acidosis, we give the soda bicarb. There could be the other H could be hypokalemia and hyperkalemia. Hypokalemia in the setting of loose motions, vomiting. If that is the hypokalemia is suspected, then we can start replacing the potassium. If there is a hyperkalemia suspected, like in patient already has a failure, then he can have hyperkalemia associated cardiac arrest. Then we give calcium gluconate, soda bicarb. We can give insulin glucose, drip. Hyperkalemia can also happen with massive transfusion, injury. So all these are the things. Hypothermia, patient could be drawn in a cold water. So hypothermia can also lead to cardiac arrest. In hypothermia is there, then we can offer the active warming, either internal or external, active or passive warming can be offered, and we can keep the temperature above 730 degree. Now these were the 5H. Now 5Ts. These are very important to remember in ACLS, in cardiac arrest patient. So what are the 5Ts? It could be a tamponade, cardiac tamponade. If you remember, he said it could be a cardiac tamponade because he had a hypotension, all that. So cardiac tamponade can happen in the setting of trauma. It can happen in the setting of renal failure, the treatment of pericardiocentesis and thoracotomy. Now it can have other T's, tension pneumothorax. Tension pneumothorax can happen patient already on ventilator, barotrauma. Or patient can have had a chest trauma, can have a tension pneumothorax. Patient with COPD, asthma can have tension pneumothorax, where what we do is I put ICD. Patient, other T is toxins. Patient might have consumed, TCP, tricyclic, drug overdose, TCP overdose, or benzodiazepines overdose, or could be the opium overdose. All this we have to judge, see the history, and we can offer the, like if TCP overdose is there, we can give the soda bicarb. If opioid overdose is there, we can give naloxone. Similarly, if see benzodiazepine is overdose is there, we can offer flumazenil. So the other thing we can suspect in our patient, it was a thrombosis, coronary thrombosis. That was STEMI patient. Or if the coronary thrombosis is there, we see the ECG and we have to ask for the cath lab, and urgent angioplasty can be offered. The other mechanism is thrombosis, that is pulmonary thrombosis, pulmonary embolism. So that can happen if the patient is already cancer patient, that can have patient was bedridden for so many days. They can have elderly patients can have thrombosis. So if the scenario is there, we can go for suspect the thrombosis, pulmonary thrombolysis. We can offer the fibrinolytics and embolectomy. So these are the 5H and 5Ts for SELS, and we look for the reversible cause and we treat them. So in nutshell, BLS was, CABD, and ACLS ABCD. So ACLS A is airway, advanced airway with capnography. B is giving oxygen, that is breathing, giving proper 100% oxygen and effective ventilation. C is circulation. So analyze the rhythm and pulse. Then if there is rhythm is shockable, give the defibrillation. Give the IV or IO access, take the epinephrine, amiodarone, or some hypertension is there, then give them epinephrine, noradrenaline, dopamine infusions. And D is, as I talk, 5H, 5T. This is the D. D stands for differential diagnosis. Identify and treat the reversible cause. Cardiac rhythm and patient history are the keys to differential diagnosis. So assess when to shock versus medicate. So these were the ABCD of ACLS and CAB for BLS. So once there is a return of spontaneous circulation, we optimize ventilation and oxygen. We try to keep the saturation above 94. We at the same time do not hyperventilate. We treat the hypotension. If there is hypotension, there was hypotension post ROCS. So he said, give 1 liter of saline. So give the bolus fluid bolus. Then we start vasopressor. We can start vasopressors in the form of either dopamine, epinephrine, or norepinephrine infusion. These are the vasopressors. One question was asked, post cardiac arrest, the agent used to maintain the BP. These are the 3 agents we use. Now, at the same time, if we suspect there is a ECG showing STEMI, one should ask for the cath lab for coronary reperfusion. And at the same time, the neurology also we have to check that whether patient is neurologically following the commands. If patient is not neurologically following the commands, we should offer him the targeted temperature management, that is TTM, because targeted temperature management it protects the brain, because hypothermia protects the brain. So if he follows the cardiac command, then advanced critical care in the ICU. So this is about ROSC. And again in ROSC, we again follow on ABCs. Then we keep the temperature between 32 to 36. When we give targeted temperature management, we keep the patient temperature around 32 to 36 for at least 24 hours. And then we go for cath lab. And then what about prognostication? Once that cardiac arrest happens, and if he comes out of cardiac arrest, we don't prognosticate for 72 hours. Or if we have offered already hypothermia, then that hypothermia should be over, and then after 72 hours, we can offer the prognosis. Till that time, we should avoid giving the prognosis. And if there is a facility for organ donation program is in place, we should consider even organ donation in patients who do not have the return of spontaneous circulation or have a brain death or withdrawal of care. So as I told you, SELS not only see about the cardiac arrest, it also take care of some of the patients where tachycardia with pulse or bradycardia with pulse. So what about tachycardia with pulse in a nutshell? That we have to see that tachycardia is stable or unstable, and whether it is wide QRS or a narrow QRS. So if tachycardia is there with unstable tachycardia, hypotension, altered mental status, signs of shock is there, ischemic chest discomfort or heart failure, then straight away we should offer synchronized cardioversion. And if it is wide irregular tachycardia, even if it is pulse, some VT, some VT may be with pulse. So there we have to give defibrillation. Otherwise, atrial fibrillation with say hypotension, we have to give synchronized cardioversion. Like narrow irregular, we give 200 joules. If it is SVT with hypotension, we give 100 joules. So that was about the narrow complex tachycardia with hemodynamically unstable. If it is a wide complex QRS, but it is stable. If it is a wide complex QRX but stable, then we can give the antiarrhythmic infusions of procainamide, amiodarone, and sotalol. These are the 3 antiarrhythmic drugs we use. Okay. So consider adenosine. Even in wide complex QRS, adenosine can be given if it is regular and monomorphic. Now adenosine usually we use in SVT. Okay, stable SVT we use adenosine, we use beta blockers, we use calcium channel blockers, and sometimes amiodarone also. But if it is wide complex QRS and it is stable, then we give this antiarrhythmics. If it is unstable, then we give DC cardioversion. What about bradycardia? Bradycardia with pulse. If you remember, this patient before going into cardiac arrest was in actually bradycardia with pulse. And that bradycardia with pulse, so initially said you prepare 0.5 milligram of atropine. So similarly, if we see bradycardia with pulse, how do we treat? The first we have to see that whether there is a hemodynamic instability, means if there is hypotension, whether there is altered mental status, whether there is any signs of shock, if there is ischemia angina ongoing, whether there is heart failure. Then if it is a bradycardia with pulse with symptoms or hemodynamic instability, we should give atropine. If atropine is not working, we should start dopamine and epinephrine infusion. Okay, but if bradycardia with pulse but there are no symptoms, we may not give any treatment. Okay, that was about the normal adult patient. Now let us see about the pregnancy. The cardiac arrest in pregnancy. So cardiac arrest in pregnancy, 2-3 points which are has to be highlighted. That one must suspect even hypermagnesemia, because patient might be receiving magnesium and patient then develops cardiac arrest. Then we must stop the magnesium, give the calcium chloride or calcium gluconate immediately. Okay. Now in pregnancy with cardiac arrest, what we offer is continuous manual lateral uterine displacement. We have to displace the uterus in the lateral wise position so as to avoid the autocaval compression by uterus, so that whenever we are giving compression, the cardiac output should reach the peripheries and the vital organs. So that is one is manual lateral uterine displacement. Then what is more important, that if there is no ROSC by 4 minutes, then we must perform immediate cesarean delivery and take out the fetus, and we can offer fetus the neonatal team. So if there is no ROSC by 4 minutes, even one scalpel may not be, we are not expert in delivery. We must go on deliver the attempt should be made to deliver the fetus immediately. So this was about pregnancy, and this is about the lateral displacement of uterus by one hand or by using the 2 hands. So that was about the pregnancy situation. Now in now the COVID areas, in the COVID times, we must know how to offer BLS and ACLS in COVID patients or suspected COVID patients. Now if you see what is the whenever we are offering CPR in COVID suspect patients or COVID positive patients, the importance they have given is protect the personnel. We must protect ourselves first. Okay, we shouldn't be very heroic without doing PPE or 10 people coming giving CPR. So what they say is that properly protect yourself first, that properly wear the PPE first, and limit the personnel who are giving the CPR. That is the first thing. The second importance point they are emphasizing is that there should not be aerosol sprayed, because during compression, during intubation, there will be the aerosol generation, and we must try to prevent the spread of that aerosol. So how do we prevent that? by using bag mask device with filter. We must use the HEPA filter whenever we are using the bag mask, and we have to see that the seal is tight. Okay, so the filter has to be used, seal has to be tight whenever we are giving ambu bag mask. So that is one thing. The other steps remains the same. First, analyze that patient is unresponsive, shout for help, ask for the AED. Then if there is no breathing, no pulse, start CPR. But when you are starting CPR, see that the bag mask device is with filter and tight seal. And if even if you are not, and the other most important point is they are not emphasizing to give the mouth-to-mouth breath. If the BLS is cardiac arrest is there and a COVID suspect corona patient positive is there, they are not advising to give mouth-to-mouth breath. They are what they are advising? To start continuous compression with passive oxygenation with face mask. Patient can be put on the face mask and the passive oxygenation can continue till the AED arrives. And once AED arrives, AED will do the job of the rhythm analysis and delivery of the shock. Every 2 minutes, it will analyze the rhythm and give the shock. What about ACLS? Again, in ACLS, you have to protect yourself, donning of PPE, limit the personal, and then start CPR, check the rhythm. If rhythm is shockable, shock. What about intubation? In intubation, see what they are saying that while doing intubation, you avoid compression. While in normal patient CPR, they are advising that don't interrupt their compression even while doing the intubation. So that is the difference. Because if you are doing chest compression and intubation, there will be the aerosol generation and the spread. So avoid chest compression during intubation. And if intubation is delayed, we can use the supraglottic airways, that is laryngeal mask airway. And we have to use bag mask device with filter. Okay. And even we are connecting to the ventilator, use the filter. Even the ventilator circuit has to be with filter. So these are the differences in COVID patient CPR.
Sir, sorry for interruption. Already, sir, 438 is there.
Okay. In two minute slides, we are finishing.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Continue.
So this is my last 2-3 slides. What are the drugs we are using? We are using, as we have seen, adenosine in PSVT. We are using amiodarone. Okay, in pulseless VT, VF, VT with pulse. We are using atropine. See, atropine is only for symptomatic bradycardia. If you see, atropine indication is not there for cardiac arrest. Only for symptomatic bradycardia, or sometimes in, usually we use in organ of phosphorus positioning also, but not in cardiac arrest patients, not in asystole. That is what I want to emphasize. Even vasopressin has gone out of the guidelines. One may use, if it is available, one may use, but vasopressin is not there for upfront use. Dopamine one can use epinephrine. Now, one thing I want to highlight about anaphylaxis. If in clinic one thing anaphylaxis happens, what epinephrine dose we give and how we give. So epinephrine is available as 1 milligram ampule. Immediately we give IM, that is 0.5 milligram IM. That is the standard dose recommended. Okay, because we will not be able to take the IV line. If IV is already available, we can give IV infusion. We can start IV infusion. And if we give IV, it has to be very short, small dose, 0.1 milligram IV. That is, and then followed by infusion. So 0.5 milligram iron epinephrine in anaphylaxis. Lignocaine can be replaced if amiodarone is not available. Magnesium sulfate has to be given in cardiac arrest with torsalis pointis. And these are the other two, procainamide and sotalol. And when do we cease the CPR? CPR we can stop if after 20 minutes there is no ROSC. Means ETCO2 has not been achieved more than 10 millimeter of mercury. And if we can see that the viable cardiac rhythms cannot be re-established. And if there is no reversible factors present, that will potentially alter the outcome. But this all cessation of CPR has to be individual, because if somebody has come with a cardiac arrest in a hypothermia setting, I would like to continue CPRs for many hours altogether, because hypothermia, some of the TCP overdose, all this drug overdose can sustain, CPR, and they can survive ultimately. So it is not only the 20 minutes is a hard and fast rule, but it has to be individualized. Now in last slide, take home message that early and high quality CPR saves life. High quality CPR, as I told, hard, push fast, avoid interruptions. Okay. now we have discussed BLS. BLS is mainly compression and defibrillation. Okay, compression and defibrillation. ACLS is advanced airways with capnography, out monitoring of the CPR and ROSC. And ultimately, ACLS also involves D for differentials and drugs. Then ROSC we have to see with the ETCO2. Post cardiac arrest care, once that pulse has come, once that ETCO2 more than 40 is achieved, we have to offer them the targeted therapeutic temperature management, that is between 32 to 36 temperature. We have to offer them early cath and for coronary thrombosis. And ultimately, we have to find out why we are saving the lives and never lose the hope when we are doing the cardiac arrest and CPR. Thank you so much for kind listening, and sorry for the interruptions in between.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nakrani sir, for these excellent slides. The slides were very beautiful and very attractive. And means what we ultimately learn is BLS is presence of mind, and ACL is teamwork with fixed protocols, which helps us to give the best of the benefit to the patient. So now we'll quickly take the questions. There are a few questions which we like to answer.
Sir, we will ask the questions after the second lecture.
You want after the second lecture? You want it?
Yeah. We are already late now.
Okay, fine. So I'll ask the questions for Nakrani sir after the second session. Okay.
Okay.
We'll go ahead with the next session then.
Dr. Rajesh Yadav sir.
Hello. Hello.
Dr. Rajesh Yadav sir, give introduction of the second speaker, Dr. Sharnik Shah.
Yeah. Thank you, DMA team, for inviting me as a chairperson, and thank you, Dr. Akshay Nakrani, for holding a good thought in BLS and ACLS. So our next speaker is Dr. Sharnik Shah. He is MS General Surgery, passed in 2006. He was a lecturer in IGMC Nagpur. He was a junior consultant in surgery in Hinduja Hospital till 2010. He started his own private practice since 2010. Presently, he is attached to Pragati Hospital, Phoenix Hospital, and Mohit Hospital as a laparoscopic surgeon. So I invite Dr. Sharnik for the next session. Hello. Am I audible to everybody? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me start this up. Now I have at least only 15 minutes left, so I am not going to bore you much. Now only this is surgical topics. आप सोच रहे होंगे 15 मिनट में surgery topic क्या करेंगे? But then it is the only thing which is very important, because early referral and early management is the only treatment which physically and financially helps the patient very much. So let's start with the first slide. Yeah, this is the first slide. So my main talk will be on acute cholecystitis. Acute cholecystitis, as you all know, is inflammation of the gallbladder. So basically, to brush up the anatomy, I'm not able to move the slide. This is the image of the gallbladder. I have not shown the image of the liver. The gallbladder is in the inferior fossa in the gallbladder, in the liver. Now the gallbladder is a pear-shaped organ, which is 30 to 50 ml. It involves the mucosa, submucosa, and the wall. Now the parts of the gallbladder, I'll go very fast. The fundus of the gallbladder, the body of the gallbladder, the Hartmann's pouch, which is connected to the biliary system. This is the biliary system via cystic duct. Now the biliary system, main work of biliary system is to collect the bile, which is formed in the liver above, which collects in the biliary system, and it is collected and concentrated in the gallbladder. Whenever we eat a meal, the gallbladder contracts and the bile is collected thrown out into the duodenum, which aids in digestion. So what happens in acute cholecystitis per se? When there is a stone here, lodged here in the neck of the gallbladder or the Hartmann's pouch, there is obstruction to the flow of bile which is here, which causes distension of the gallbladder, inflammation of the gallbladder, which leads to symptoms of acute cholecystitis. Now let us start. What is next slide. What is cholecystitis? Cholecystitis is inflammation of the gallbladder, as I said before, due to obstruction of the cystic duct. Usually, it is more than 90% of the cases. It is gallstones. Remaining 1% can be due to tumor or a foreign body. And in very few cases, less than 1%, acalculous cholecystitis. That is, there is nothing which can obstruct, but then also the gallbladder is obstructed, causing acalculous cholecystitis. I will talk more on acute cholecystitis. I'm not able to do. Yeah,
It will go slowly. It will go slowly.
Acute cholecystitis. Now, first I'll talk about biliary colic. In the slide, I am not able to catch the slide. Yeah. One more slide. Yeah, first
This
slide
one,
is.
sir? Okay.
Signature, I am managing. Signature.
Okay.
First slide is biliary colic. I am not able to get that slide. Now, what is biliary colic? Biliary colic is the pain which is there in the gallbladder, secondary to inflammation, secondary to obstruction to cystic duct. Now, pain is episodic, constant, maybe episodic, maybe constant, continuous, subsides within 5 to 6 hours, may be associated with nausea and vomiting, but usually no fever. The pain and fever usually subside within 5 to 6 hours if there is fever. Now, what is acute cholecystitis? Acute cholecystitis is same as biliary colic, but the pain is more severe, more constant, persisting, and which is more than for 24 hours, which is associated with recurring episodes of pain with vomiting and nausea, may be associated fever. What is the etiology of acute cholecystitis? In our surgery, fat, fertile, flatulent female of 50 now does not hold true any much. But yes, females are involved more than male. It's more than 3 times males, females are involved. Obesity is other factor. Drugs, usually drugs which are given in estrogen and progesterone for IV intravenous fertilization and for prostate cancer. Pregnancy can also cause cholestasis and increased cholecystitis. And most common increased age with comorbidities like diabetes and other things. I'm not able to move the slides. Acute cholecystitis. Cholecystitis, the clinical findings of cholecystitis is commonly we see a tenderness in right upper quadrant, what we call as Murphy's sign. There is tenderness in the right hypochondric region, which is also on palpation. There is an inspiratory catch. Patient winces in severe pain due to involvement of the peritoneum. Associated tachycardia is there, fever is there. In some cases, due to distended gallbladder, we may feel palpable gallbladder. What is the diagnosis? Ultrasound is the gold standard for diagnosis of acute cholecystitis. Fasting patient, but usually it is done fasting. Minimum 4 hours fasting is required. It is very specific and sensitive in more than 95% of cases. What are the features of acute cholecystitis? Pericholecystic fluid, gallbladder wall thickening of more than 3 to 4 millimeters. What we call as sonographic Murphy's sign, that is tenderness on palpation with a sonographic probe. Acoustic shadowing in the case of stones and slurs, and distended GP if acute episode. I'll show a gallbladder. This is an ultrasound normal with a normal cholecystititis without cholecystitis. As you can see, the gallbladder wall is normal, no thickened wall. The 2 white dots which you can see is a gallstones with a black colored shadowing down there. These are the post-acoustic shadowing which is usually seen in cholelithiasis. But what we see in cholecystitis, we see a thickened gallbladder wall here, which I'll see, which if I'll able to move the slide, I'll able to show you. can see a thickened gallbladder wall, which is usually more than 4 millimeters. You can see a pericholecystic fluid collection, which is there surrounding the gallbladder. You can see acoustic shadowing, which is classical of acute cholecystitis. This is sonography of acute cholecystitis. As I said before, thickened gallbladder wall, multiple gallstones with sludge. And this is an edema of the gallbladder wall and pericholecystic fluid, which is seen surrounding with a black head. Other investigations which can be used in diagnosis of acute cholecystitis are complete blood count. Complete blood count, usually the counts are on the higher side, but usually less than 15,000 per cubic millimeters. LFTs, SGOTs, and SGPTs. Hello? SGOTs and SGPTs are mildly raised, associated with mild raise of bilirubin. In complications of cholecystitis, we might have serum amylase also raised. CT scan is inferior to ultrasound in diagnosis of cholecystitis because gallstones per se are radiolucent, but it is a diagnostic investigation of choice in complications of cholecystitis. I would not go into details of HIDA scan because we do not have much time now. Treatment complications, the complications of acute cholecystitis. Now it is as you can see, when the gallbladder gets obstructed due to a stone, there is distension of the gallbladder wall leading to thinning of the gallbladder wall, which in 10 to 15% of the cases leads to perforation of the gallbladder. In continuation with the perforation of the gallbladder, the blood supply of the gallbladder wall also gets hampered, leading to gangrene. And the inspissated bile, which is there inside the gallbladder, gets obstructed and then gets secondarily infected, what we call as empyema of the gallbladder. Then what we have a hydrops of the gallbladder, which is collection of the bile inside the gallbladder without infection of the gallbladder, but surgery is advised in this patient. When there is a perforation of the gallbladder wall into the intestine or into the duodenum, what we call it as cholecystoenteric fistula, which may lead to gallstone ileus. Small size stones lodging into the duodenum or the terminal bile duct can cause what we call as gallstone pancreatitis or biliary pancreatitis. Other complications, management, as you all know, laparoscopic cholecystectomy is a treatment of choice. But what is important is ideal time of surgery. Patient should present to a surgeon within 48 to 72 hours of onset of symptoms. So earlier the better for the patient, physically and financially as well. If the patient is unfit for surgery or the patient has come after some time, like 7 to 8 days with resolving pain and resolving signs and symptoms, we can treat the patient medically with third generation cephalosporin like piperacillin and tazobactam. In very high risk patient or surgically unfit patient or with high comorbidities or recent surgery, other treatment which can be done is cholecystostomy. What is cholecystostomy? Cholecystostomy is cutaneous. Skin pe cut karke you to remove the gallbladder collection, puncture the gallbladder and remove the collection, which may be therapeutic and diagnostic, both in very high risk patient. You can do it surgically in the OT or you can do it CT guided or ultrasound guided. One more mention I want to. Differential diagnosis of acute cholecystitis. As you all know, any patient with epigastric ischemia is very important. So any patient with epigastric pain, ECG has to be taken before and foremost before ultrasound is done. Other surgical cases are peptic ulcer perforation, peptic ulcer, pancreatitis can also present. Appendicitis early can present as epigastric pain, which then goes and localizes itself in right iliac fossa. Hepatitis is one of the differential diagnoses, and right lower zone lung lesions like pneumonia, pleuritis are also involved in differential diagnosis. Herpes zoster is a very rare diagnosis, but initially before the appearance of any lesions, skin lesions, we may confuse cholecystitis with herpes zoster. Now, one passing comment about acalculous cholecystitis, it is a very rare complication of type of cholecystitis. Less than 1% of patients be present with acalculous cholecystitis, but it is associated with very high morbidity and mortality rate is 10 to 50% in untreated patients. Usually it is associated with biliary stasis seen in debilitated bedridden patients. It usually with major surgery, severe trauma, sepsis, patient with a long-term TPN. TPN is total parenteral nutrition, only IV fluids. patient who is prolonged fasting, patient with cardiac events, patient with sickle cell disease, or patient with diabetes. Same, it is very high risk patient, very high risk with mortality of 10 to 50% of the cases. Again, ultrasound is the treatment of choice. So treatment of which is antibiotics in high risk patient, decompression of the obstructed GB, as I mentioned before, cholecystostomy with either CT guided or open through a small incision in the poor risk patient for surgery. Urgent cholecystectomy can also be advised, lap or open in relatively fit patients. So salient points of the whole talk is 2/3 of the patients with gallstones are asymptomatic throughout their lives. Hence, can be advised to follow up routinely without surgery. Now, patients with comorbidities, especially diabetes, or high-risk patients with high risk of complications, surgery should be offered to them who are asymptomatic as well, without cholecystitis. Laparoscopic cholecystectomy is the treatment of choice in acute cholecystitis. Now, results are excellent if surgery is performed within 48 to 72 hours of onset of symptoms. Other most important point is resolving cholecystitis can be operated electively if the patient is fine. Now, complications of cholecystitis, what I mentioned before, like gangrenous cholecystitis, perforation of the GB, biliary pancreatitis, and so on and so forth, early surgery is advised in them, but though with increased morbidity to the patient as well as for the surgeons. Early referral and prudent management gives excellent results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shrenik. That was very brief. In a short and sweet period of time, we could finish and cover majority of the points. So now quickly in continuation, what we will do is we will first finish the question answers for Dr. Shrenik. So we'll have a continuity, and then obviously we're going to shoot questions to Dr. Nakrani sir. So anybody has any questions for Dr. Shrenik?
Sir, patients are already, but the doctors are already bored. I think 72 participants, we have only 58 participants.
No. It is a good response. So one question from my side, Dr. Shrenik. According to you, who is a bad candidate for a lap cholecystectomy? Who is not a good candidate?
You mean to ask the contraindications?
Contraindications, yes.
So initially there were very long list of contraindications, but now there are no absolute contraindications per se for surgery, but relative contraindications do exist. Now, patient who cannot tolerate pneumoperitoneum. So when we do a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, we push air inside. So when we push air inside, there is decreased vagal return, decreased cardiac output. So patients with higher, like with cardiac diseases, patients who are bedridden, so for that patients we usually advise open cholecystectomy. Actually, these patients are usually not even fit for open cholecystectomy as well.
Okay, so, you convert it later on.
Cholecystostomy.
Right.
We are commonly seeing congestive heart failure patients having cholecystitis.
Right.
So, are they really a candidate for undergoing cholecystectomy open?
It is usually CCF patients usually have acalculous cholecystitis. As I mentioned, acalculous cholecystitis is a very high risk condition. The overall condition of the patient, if the patient is fine, then we can offer him open cholecystectomy if the patient's EF and cardiac status is okay. But since the patient's condition is cardiac status is not fine, the other thing which we said is to do a percutaneous cholecystostomy. That is, we open up the bladder and remove the bile collection and put in a drain. So it is really therapeutic as well.
And what about cholecystectomy in a pregnant case? Is it it goes smoother? Is it indicated? Should be done?
Yeah, it is. It can be indicated. Usually, second trimester between fourth month to around 6th to 7th month is the ideal time of laparoscopic cholecystectomy. But then it is difficult to manage post-op also. But then, if the patient is symptomatic, it is the right time to operate.
Okay. And just I would like you to, because a gallbladder stone will not go without a HIDA scan, just 2 lines on HIDA scan. Yes. Just 2 lines.
HIDA scan is a radionuclide scan. Now, it a full form of hepatic immunodiacetate scan. Now, what do they do is, they inject a radio-labeled contrast. Usually, technetium-99m is injected, and it injected, which is selectively taken up by the Kupffer cells of the liver. Selectively taken up which is excreted in the bile, which the gallbladder picks up. So once you inject this contrast, within 15 minutes, the gallbladder should be seen on the screen.
Right.
If you cannot see the gallbladder even after 1 hour after injection of the contrast, then it is diagnostic of acute cholecystitis. But then there are high false positive results as well. If the patient is have cholestasis like in pregnancy, which you usually do not do a HIDA scan in that patient, but then there is cholestasis, you can get a negative report.
Okay. Okay.
Absence of gallbladder, congenital absence of gallbladder.
Okay. One question from the audience I will take. Dr. Jayantilal Shah, when do you do a planned surgery after an acute attack of acute cholecystitis?
As I said before, patient with acute cholecystitis presenting to you after 5 to 7 days, if the patients clinically have reduced pain, no fever, associated CBC showing normal counts, and patient is clinically stable, so we advise up to 4 to 6 weeks of surgery. In the meantime, we advise the patient to control their diet, control their sugars. But if the patient is high risk and diabetic with increased pain, we immediately advise surgery with all the complications explained.
Okay. So I think we are done with Dr. Shrenik Shah. Thank you very much for answering the questions in a very brief period of time. And now we'll go to Dr. Nakrani sir. Again, I know there are hundreds of questions and thousands of queries for him, but we'll surely try to address each and every of them quickly. So one question is from the audience, Dr. Vinita Matthew. She is saying that if a patient is brought to hospital with history of being unresponsive, on examination by the medical team, there is no carotid pulse and pupils are dilated, then how should the medical team go ahead? How should they respond?
Okay, so I think there can be a difference what we following and what should be followed. I think medico-legally we must give an attempt to do the CPR, irrespective of carotid pulse, pupil dilatation, because pupil dilatation can happen with many intoxications, like cocaine and atropine or scopolamine. So if we have to see the medico-legally, if any unresponsive patients with pupil dilatation, carotid pulse not felt, we must give CPR base ACL up to ACLS and see that the CPR is not working for that patient, and then only we should declare. But that doesn't mean that we are following all this for all the patients. It is all situational and the individual call has to be taken. But the learning is that we must give the CPR for all the first contact, medical contact, and see that the patient is not surviving, means responding to the CPR.
You meant to say we should at least documentation purpose we should give.
Yes.
Right. And there is one more question from Dr. I think Dr. Okay, I'll ask a question from my side immediately. There are these AEDs which are put on in the gyms and in the airports. So if a non-trained, if an untrained medical person or untrained person has to apply the pads on the chest, then please just give us a short idea of where the pads are.
So basically the pads the location where we apply the pads. So normally it is on the right side below the clavicle. That is the first pad is applied. That is the anterior, what we call is anterior. And the second pad is applied is the lateral. That is the below left axilla. That is the lateral or inferior pad. This is the first location where we can apply. Or if there is injury on the right side, then we can apply it on the left side only, one anterior and one posterior. So that is second this thing. Or patient has been given already a prone position. There also we can give anterior, posterior on the left side. And once that pad is applied and we switch on the AED, the next the commands will be given by the AED, that he is analyzing the rhythm, now he is shocking, you stay away, and then you start compression. Everything will be taken care by the AED. And using AED, there is no training required because everything is, they're written, everything is there on this thing. Only you have to just take out the pads, apply it, start the AED, and the things will be done.
Sir, also can you give the right point where the ideal cardiac compression should be given?
So yeah, where the compression should be given, it has to be lower 1/3 of the sternum and between the two nipple lines. There we should start with the two hands, use of this lower part of our hand, and our elbows should be fixed 90 degree. We should not be bending our elbows. And we should be literally leaning over the patients, you know, while we are giving the compression. So it has to be that hard and it has to be fast as the rate of 100 to 120 per minute. So it is below 1/3 of the, and in the center, on the sternum, not on the apex or laterally or medially, but it has to be on the sternum, lower 1/3 of the sternum and between the two nipples.
Okay. So what is a patient when we say that the patient is having a symptomatic bradycardia, and how much drug will you give atropine, and can it be given at the clinic level by our family physician friends?
Yes, it can be given at clinic level. See, whenever there is a symptomatic bradycardia, means patient might be having angina with bradycardia. Bradycardia means below 50 of heart rate of below 50 with symptoms of angina, heart failure, altered mental sensorium, patient in shock. These are all symptoms with bradycardia. If these are not there with bradycardia, you can wait and watch. No drugs required.
Right.
If there are symptoms, you start with giving atropine. 0.5 milligram of atropine up to the 3 milligram. In 6 shots you can give. After that, you cannot go on giving atropine. It will not work.
Okay.
Atropine is not working. You start try for transcutaneous pacing. Start with epinephrine infusion, dopamine infusion, sometimes isoprenaline infusion, and ultimately transcutaneous pacing, means transvenous pacing. Sorry. So transcutaneous to transvenous pacing.
And sir, one more question is from audience. Dr. Nalin Vaishmakar is asking, when do you use epinephrine and when do you prefer dopamine in case of ACLS?
So as I told you, dopamine is not there in ACLS cardiac arrest. Dopamine is only for once the ROSC is achieved. Pulse is there, BP is there, but hypotension is there. There we use dopamine to raise the BP.
Right.
Epinephrine is used for cardiac arrest in even if shockable rhythm and obviously in asystole. Now in asystole or PE, what they say, to start using epinephrine as early as possible in asystole or PEA. Whereas in for VT, our priority is defibrillation and not the epinephrine. So epinephrine in cardiac arrest ACLS, dopamine is for BP, ROCS means post cardiac arrest care.
Okay. Fine. Thank you very much, sir, for answering the questions. Dr. Matthew sir has also asked you to emphasize on Code Blue team, but I think due to
so I tell you, whatever video, second video I had shown is a Code Blue video only.
For the ACLS guy.
Yeah. So that was a in hospital cardiac arrest Code Blue video. That was the mega code for Code Blue only. So because see, once the patient had arrested, he had pressed the Code Blue button. You know, if you see the video. So it was a Code Blue video only.
Okay. So last one question from my side. When do you say that the patient will have to go for angiography? Is it the ECG finding? Is it the 2D echo finding? But you feel that the patient has to go for angiography. There is no choice.
Are you talking in context of the cardiac arrest or a normal patient?
No, cardiac arrest. In case of
cardiac arrest. So cardiac arrest, yeah. So whenever there is a cardiac arrest, we are giving ACLS, and there is a ROSC, means pulse has come, BP has come. Right. Now you are simultaneously thinking what might have led to the cardiac arrest. You might have thinking patient had chest pain and ECG showing STEMI. That patient must go for cath lab.
Okay.
Or even if ECG is not showing a STEMI, but you are clinically suspecting this could be a coronary thrombosis. Sometimes ECG or echo may not show, but there will be a chance angiography and angioplasty will help in surviving, you know.
So it is not just investigation based, it is also your clinical
suspicion. Even if there is a strong suspicion, of pulmonary embolism, you may not prove it, and we just give the fibrinolytics.
Okay. Right.
So, it is just the clinical suspicion. If the threshold is very low, then we can go on giving the treatment.
Okay, fine. I think many of our questions are being covered. If anybody has still more questions, then they can straight away WhatsApp.
Can you give, I think there are two questions. One question is there, Dr. Agrawat. Can you give adrenaline intracardiac? So I tell you,
that question. Yes.
Intracardiac adrenaline is out of the syllabus now. Okay, intracardiac is out. Then first thumb is out. Then high dose of epinephrine is out. Then atropine in cardiac arrest is out. So these are the things which are, very much we have to keep in mind. Amiodarone is in, 300 milligram we use in amiodarone in cardiac arrest, whereas 150 we use in VT with pulse. So these are the things, that we have to keep in mind. So giving intracardiac adrenaline is not advisable nowadays.
Okay, any more questions from audience? Anybody, you can randomly just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can you allow all of them to unmute themselves? And
Please. Everybody is allowed to unmute themselves and you can ask your question.
The report that is second report that we discussed now.
Hello. Akshay.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Kiran Shinde here.
Hi, sir. Yeah.
Hi. And now, excellent presentation, both of you all. But just a request, if you can post the videos on some site so that we can access the videos very easily.
I'll share the videos personally on DMA sites, DMA WhatsApp group that we can go on. But I myself felt that these two videos were very good.
They were excellent.
Get it.
Excellent. Okay. So if you can have the videos, we'll be happy with that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sir, this ACLS 2020 is over. The workshop is over. It's done.
It's been conducted by some of the institutes. They conduct the workshop. They give you the certificates.
Right.
I can share where I did. Live institute is there with Dr. Ajit Desai is conducting. So they conduct this workshops. Full 1 day workshop is there for BLS, ACLS, and then proper AHA certification is being given to the candidate. So we can contact them and they can arrange. For our DMA team also, we can, after this COVID and all this is, they're not there. Actually, keeping a workshop for ACLS is good idea.
Sometimes we'll take your help and we will organize this for all of us.
Sure. Because
hello,
presenting a
friends.
lecture one may not be in a flow, but seeing that is why I kept the videos. One can see.
Right.
Because actually what we are following in practice is different than what is recommended. If you see.
Hello, friends.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Ganesha and Dr. Akshay Nakrani. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Subodh. Thank you very much.
Hello, friends. Hello, friends. I'm Dr. Subodh Narurkar. On behalf of the ISER Medical Association, I would like to thank Dr. Nakrani and Dr. Shranik for giving a good and informative and updating speech with good slides. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Vinayak.
Yeah, over to Vinayak.
Vinayak Desai,
Over to Vinayak.
words from you. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Vinayak, sir, unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
It was an excellent session. We learned a lot from this. One request to everyone: every Wednesday we will be having our webinars. All are requested that DMA is conducting this on. We are giving the Zoom subscription. So we are charging this for 2,000 per session. So if anybody is interested for this, kindly contact the committee. Thank you. We all end this session now.
Thank you everybody. Thank you speakers. Thank you the audience. We got a good count of 75 plus.
Good God. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.